everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming. Happy Easter, Passover, whatever you celebrate. So today it's part of the Best Practices series for MaRS. Today's focus is Social Tech for Social Change. My name is Lisa Torgman. I run the Social Innovation Projects here at MaRS under the SIG department, Social Innovation Department. And one of the areas of focus for us is to really understand this new communications paradigm and how people are leveraging it for their social change activities. And to that point, we have three great speakers for you here today to discuss three different aspects of how people are using this new media. But really quickly, I just want to survey the crowd. How many of you are working in social change? So most of you. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that you know that the examples that we're giving today, because it's a best practices series, they're specific to people that are working in cause-related activities. So if you have any questions about social tech more broadly, you could definitely ask me that after the session today. So I want to introduce our first speaker. She will be talking about Fundraising 2.0. It's Kirstin Beardsley from CanadaHelps.org. She's going to highlight where social technology and fundraising intersect and how nonprofits can engage their constituents, work on their mission, and inspire philanthropy. Kirstin's also one of our partners in a major program that we run called My Charity Connects. And that is coming up soon in June as part of our Net Change program. I'll be explaining that after the session today. So today is just supposed to be fun and lively. If you guys have any questions, please put up your hands because it's really supposed to be a dialogic rather than just one-way communication. So I'll first introduce Kirstin and get her to come up here and set up her presentation. And at the end, we'll actually have all of the speakers coming up and doing more of a broad Q&A. So if you feel like you haven't gotten what you wanted to out of the sessions, just wait to the end.
Thank you. So I very much encourage questions throughout. I threw together some ideas, but if I'm really open to people just kind of interrupting and asking questions. So just a little bit more about me. My name is Kirstin Beardsley. I work at Canada Helps. And Canada Helps we're a nonprofit organization in Canada, and we help other nonprofit organizations with online fundraising. And we usually we actually facilitate online transactions for organizations in Canada. So we usually deal with small, kind of medium-sized nonprofit organizations in the country, those that don't have the resources to implement their own online donation processing. So the presentation I've got, the examples I have for you are pretty practical, because I deal with people who can't do a lot of theoretical stuff. And then the other thing about Canada Helps is because we're a nonprofit and we help other nonprofits, we're not talking about one particular cause or one organization or one way of doing things, but all charities in Canada. And so to frame the discussion, I am going to get to practical tips and ideas, but I first wanted to talk about this idea of social technology itself and how I believe that social technology really isn't just another channel for our fundraising communications. It's not just, now you've got your brochure and your direct mail appeal, and then now you've got your Facebook page and you put all the same kinds of information on your Facebook page as you would have put in your brochure, your direct mail, or any other sort of traditional fundraising appeal that you would have had. What I think social technology does to organizations is that it is an opportunity, I think, and increasingly I would say an imperative around breaking down the barriers that exist in our nonprofits between our donors, between our clients and board members and volunteers and fundraisers and staff. And I think it compels us towards a new way of creating social change. And I think that Matt and Peter are going to talk a little bit more in depth about that. I'm just going to talk more about what that means from a fundraising perspective. And I think one of the things that I obviously think this is a good thing, but we're moving away from traditional fundraising models. So the model of, a religious entity handing out services to a group of disadvantaged people is changing, which I think is a really, a positive situation. I also think kind of the rise of the middle class giving model, where people gave as part of their middle class identity, is kind of crumbling as well. And I think that nonprofits, on the whole, aren't catching up as quickly as the public wants them to in terms of conveying where people are now and what motivates us to get involved in the causes that we care about. So away from this charitable model, I think we're moving, I have some examples. These are appeals, old appeals, obviously, from kind of the early 20th century. And I brought these in because I wanted to highlight that previously giving was part of an identity, right? Like the act of giving itself was the whole project. And it was, I have the money to give, I am someone who gives, and then you don't even have a sense of what these causes represent. It's giving that's important. And I think what we're doing now is moving towards an impact model, where people are wanting to be engaged in the impact that your organization has. And I don't make any judgments around, whether this is a better model or whether the previous model was better. I mean, I guess I do. I like this model better, but what I'm trying to say about judging is I don't necessarily think we've become necessarily more altruistic as people. I think we have always cared about causes, and I think now we want to feel like we're part of that cause as much as we ever wanted to. And one of the ways that we feel a part of causes is by giving money towards them. But I think what we're finding now with a new generation of donor is that it's not enough for the money to go into a massive institution and good things to come out at the end. They need to feel part of that story, and they need to understand how you're doing the work that you do and why you have the impact that you have. And again, I think, this might sound kind of second nature to a lot of us who are working in this space, but I think actually organizations are doing a pretty poor job of translating this into actual fundraising communications and actual engagement with donors and clients and constituents. Because I think, as nonprofits and as people who are engaged in social change, we do something pretty incredible. We ask people to give us their money, and we don't give them, a shiny new iPod or a flat screen TV. We give them something really intangible, but we have to, the stats kind of show that younger donors aren't as plentiful as previous generations. And I don't think that's because young people don't care. I actually think, people from my generation and younger actually do care and are, I would say, even, more engaged than a lot of previous generations. But I think we're just doing a really bad job of our messaging and our communications and getting those people on board. So that's that for the kind of spiel at the beginning. I'm going to talk about practical kind of ideas and tips. And again, I think a lot of this is going to be second nature to some of the people who have used social technology for a while. So if you want me to go further in depth, then I definitely can do that. And I think this is a really important starting point around building relationships. And that obviously goes back to what I said at the beginning about this isn't just another channel. This is really about building long-term relationships with your constituents and how social technology allows us to do that. And I think, good fundraisers will say to me and have that fundraising has always been about relationships. And I think that that's true, but I think if we're honest with ourselves at organizations, the relationships we focused on building are the ones with the donors who are going to give us $1 million at the end of 5 years, and not necessarily with the base of annual donors. And I don't know how many of you work in kind of a traditional fundraising role, but your annual donors are the ones who give you $20 in December usually, kind of that mass of people who are just there supporting you year on year. And I think that the imperative now is to interact with that group of kind of, $20, $50 donor and figure out why they're engaged in your cause and what they want out of it. So I think, one of the things that we all have to do is listen as much as we push. Obviously, on social technology, we should all be monitoring conversations around our cause and finding the people who are speaking about our cause and not just about our institutions. Not just about our institutions. So again, another practical way that we can do that is to rely on the rule of thirds. So if you have social technology presence on Facebook, on Twitter, on a blog, or any of the different tools, I like to use this framework. Until building relationships online becomes second nature, until you figure out how to converse with people and engage them, this is kind of an exercise to use till you get to that point where it does become kind of a second nature. So the rule of thirds really is about 1/3 me, 1/3 you, 1/3 us. So when you are engaging with a constituency on one of the tools, 1/3 of your no more than 1/3 of what you post or talk about should be related directly to promoting your organization and the work that you do. You should do that. That's why people follow you. That's why people care about your organization. But that should be about 1/3 of what you do. 1/3 of what you do should be you. So it's about asking questions and talking to people and having real conversations and building real relationships, and not necessarily related to your cause. Often that's why you and these people will come together. But it could be just about nurturing that relationship. And then 1/3 is about us. It's about the community in which we operate. It's about the networks that we're building. It's about how can we come together as organizations and work together with different people to enhance the mission that we all have. So I think this is a really important rule to keep in mind. And again, until it becomes kind of second nature how you do this online. The next thing that I think is really important is to talk about people and choosing the right people to work on your social technology communications. We recently did a project with the federal government looking at how nonprofits in Canada are using social technologies. And I was pretty floored by the number of organizations across Canada that have a high school volunteer or an intern doing all their social communications. Not that I don't think that's the right person. That could very well be the right person, but I think the first thing that you should be looking for is someone who's really passionate about your cause and who is able to understand the importance of building connections and networks in an online space. And once you find that person, and they could very well be your high school volunteer, but they are probably more likely several people at your organization, and not just the person that understands how to use Facebook because they've been using it since they were 12 years old, that it's really not about the tools. And then once you find the right people, it's important to let them be themselves. You're not going to get very far in a social technology space if you look like an institution, that there isn't a lot of patience for just brands speaking to each other online. And I think that we underestimate the appetite that people have for understanding who's behind the organizations that we all work for. And a really fun example, I don't know if any of you have seen this, the Red Cross example. Are you guys familiar with this? So Red Cross in the US, after Japan struck, this is only a couple days after, so they're all focused on raising funds and what that communication is going to look like. And someone at their organization was using Hootsuite to manage both their personal and their professional Red Cross account. And she tweeted that Ryan found some beer in the fridge, and when we drink, we do it right, getting slizzard. And that was sent out through Red Cross's brand to the whole of Red Cross's Twitter feed. But what happened in the end was something pretty fantastic, which was the boss didn't come down, fire that person, and put this corporate apology up. They did delete the tweet, but the response was, we deleted the rogue tweet, but rest assured the Red Cross is sober and we've confiscated the keys. So again, it's adding personality. They didn't have to deny that that was a real person working there and, oh my goodness, she drinks beer. But what this actually turned into was a spontaneous fundraising campaign, because people in their community were inspired and liked the fact that there were real people working at the Red Cross that make mistakes, that Dogfish Heads, Midas, they donated a bunch of money, encouraged their constituents to donate blood or money. So it actually turned into a really fun, spontaneous moment of giving. And I think at organizations, we are so worried about this kind of thing happening that we shut it down when it actually could turn into something really wonderful. And not just money, not just fundraising, but an opportunity to show who we are and why we care about the work that we do and who we are behind kind of these institutions. Because when you think of the Red Cross, it's pretty institutional. But they're finding a way to bring some personality to the work that they do. I'm conscious of time. So another key principle that I encourage organizations to keep in mind is transparency. And again, I think this is an imperative in this day and age. Not just because there's a PR crisis waiting to happen now that everyone has access to YouTube or Facebook or Twitter and can talk about your organization, but because, again, I think it's about this idea of breaking down the institutional barriers that separate all of our constituents. The reason I put a goat and a child up, of course, is because I think this is a pretty common idea in the nonprofit sector where people, this is really good and really bad. International organizations are really great at getting people to feel connected to the impact that they're having by purchasing goats or sponsoring children. But what is coming to pass, and what I think is going to become an increasing problem for our sector, is that, of course, when you buy a goat, you're not buying a goat, you're giving a donation to an organization, that goat actually doesn't arrive somewhere. And when you sponsor a child, you're not necessarily, I'm not speaking about particular organizations, but this practice in our sector. When you sponsor a child, you're not necessarily sponsoring that child, you are sponsoring works that organization does that could help a theoretical child like the one that you got the picture of, right? So, and while I think that that's actually wise, I think, organizations shouldn't be buying goats just because we all want to buy 10,000 goats this Christmas, and so they're going to send 10,000 goats to a village that can't use them. They're going to take that money and do what they have decided that, makes sense with their level of expertise. But I think that there are still people out there who think when they buy a goat, that goat gets shipped somewhere. And that level of transparency is going to be increasingly important. And the reason I chose this kind of as the example is because I think that there's a lot of power in the ways that the goat and the child help us and encourage us to give, and they tell a really compelling story. So another principle that I have around using social technology for fundraising is storytelling. Again, a lot of us who use social media a lot this is kind of second nature. Of course, you tell stories. But the nonprofit sector in Canada is sitting on a can I use that in that? No. On a mountain, a figurative mountain of stories, of works that we do and impact that we're having, and we don't tell those stories effectively. And we are so kind of addicted to saying we saved 10,000 people last year that we're missing the story of the one person that is really actually going to then compel someone to make a difference. We were at Canada Helps, we work with nonprofits, and we were recently in Winnipeg, and we're trying to encourage small nonprofits to do this better, to tell their stories better, and so we're facilitating that by creating a bit of a video project around some of the causes. And we were doing this video with an organization called Inner City Youth Alive. It's like a boys and girls club in Winnipeg. And they work with inner city youth and do after-school programs. And the B-roll of the video is so much more interesting than what was on when the guy thought he was talking. He was saying, we have 100 kids come here every day. And then the B-roll is this fantastic stories of these kids whose lives were actually impacted. And one of the things that they do is they fix up old cars, and they let kids, they bring kids in, and he said, the line is so fantastic. It's like, there's a lot of ways to get your hands on a car in North End of Winnipeg, and this is the way we prefer kids get their hands on cars. And then they put racing engines in them and let the kids race around the track in Winnipeg, which, maybe not work with a kind of a mom crowd that might be worried about those kids, but I think there's a pretty big constituency of guys who would think that that's pretty cool, that they let these kids fix up these old beater cars and then send them off. And he's like, yeah, we flip a couple cars every year, but the kids turn out all right, which is, again, a really fantastic story. And it's not the story of we serve 100 kids and it's a better story than that. And just to give a kind of practical example of how that looks now, this is an old cancer appeal for striking back against cancer. And this is how the Canadian Cancer Society looks now. And I actually think it's interesting that the message is quite similar. It's about joining the fight and striking back against this disease. But the appeal of the individual stories is really where they're focusing their attention and their energy. And I know the Canadian Cancer Society is a big organization, but I think any organization and anyone working in social change can do this. You need a flip camera and a YouTube account, and you can tell personal stories. But focus on the one and not on kind of the statistics and the many, because people aren't motivated by 10,000 people. They're motivated by one person. Another example that I have is the Salvation Army of Canada. And they're doing something interesting, which is that they've taken their annual report, which if you work for a nonprofit, you know is a real pain every year. You put a lot of energy into finding these great stories, and then you publish them in a report that no one ever reads. And you send it out, and you can't tell if anyone actually opens it or if they just recycle it. So they've turned it into an online storytelling project. So they don't actually produce a report anymore, and they just interview clients, and they interview their leader. I don't know his title, but they interview their leader, and they put it all in an online space. Not only is that makes for better storytelling, but that's something that then they can actually measure and track and see what people are engaging with. And they've had, not only are they saving a lot of money in terms of mailing and production of a print report, but they're having a lot more impact in terms of telling their story. Another principle for social technology is to encourage participation and action. I think there's this term that I don't know if any of you have heard, but around slacktivism, where people, it's like people won't come to a rally, but they'll click a button kind of thing. But I think we underestimate people a little bit, and I don't actually think we create really fun and effective ways for people to take action around the causes that we support. So you need to encourage it, and you need to remove the barriers that allow people to take meaningful action, whether they are online or offline. And a really fun example I have of this is a Big Brothers Big Sisters organization in Southern Ontario. I don't know if anyone's going to tell me when I'm taking up too much time, because I will just go on. So Big Brothers Big Sisters organization, every time they match 1 minute, oh dear, okay. I'll get there. So this is a good one though. So every time they match a big brother with a little, they call them, or a big sister with a little, they take them out to dinner. And they were having trouble. They didn't want to continually fund that out of operations. So what they do is they post it on their Facebook page. Anyone want to pay for these people's dinner? It's such a simple thing. They have dinner for every match that they're ever going to make for the rest of their lives, because people were so excited to sponsor that dinner that they have restaurants who are saying, will anytime a big or a little wants to come for dinner, we'll pay for it. But it's simple, meaningful, easy action that people can take. So I think we kind of underestimate people's willingness to take action and our ability to create, to remove those barriers. Another movement that we're seeing in kind of social technology and fundraising is peer-to-peer, and I think this is really powered by the tools, but also people's desire to have an impact and take action and not really care about the institutional rules you have in place. They want to take action the way they want to take action. And this is a peer-to-peer fundraising page. I love it because this kid is so judging everyone. What will you do? And he's looking at us like we're not doing anything. But he wanted to take on fundraising for their Canadian Red Cross Society in the wake of the disaster in Japan, and he did it. And he raised, as of a couple days ago, over $1,000. And we're seeing far too many organizations who want to shut this kind of thing down because they can't control it. And I think that that's absolutely ridiculous. If this kid is doing this at 10, he's kind of in your supporting your cause for life. And luckily, the Red Cross is an organization that encourages this, but there are some organizations that would contact Canada Helps and ask us to take this page down because they can't manage it. Another principle, of course, is around measuring results. And I know you all do this, so I'm not going to belabor this too much, except to say that I think we're addicted to measuring currently. I think we measure way too much. We can measure everything online, but we should measure instead what really matters. So start with your mission and how you're using social technologies to further your mission, and then measure the things that are allowing you to track how you're doing against that mission. The other thing that bothers me about measurement is that people just put it in a spreadsheet and report it to their CEO or their executive director or their board every couple of months and say, oh, look, we have 10,000 fans and now we've got 12,000 fans. That, there's something about you have to take action with what you're doing and what you're measuring. And I think the biggest takeaway for our organizations is that continue to do what is successful and stop doing everything else. and follow what works for your constituents. So take action, don't just measure for the sake of measuring. And then I will end it there because I know I'm taking up someone else's time. But in the end, it's just about letting go and encouraging people to open the barriers at your organization and encouraging people to come in. So I will end it there.
That was great. Thank you, Kirstin. I hope that you guys have questions for Kirstin after. So I was taking notes like crazy on that one. I think that, clearly we're in a new paradigm, and it's not the yesteryear model of giving anymore. I think these tools are really offering us a chance to open up, and I really liked some of those points that you made. They were great about getting beyond the institutions and opening up to the people that really work behind them. So now, and I'm not reading all of our speakers' bios, as you can see, because I think that it's important. If you guys are really interested in what these guys are saying, please follow up with them after. But I will say, Matt Thompson, he's the Chief Storyteller and Education Program Officer. I love that title. I just want to sit around a campfire with Matt. For Mozilla Drumbeat, a Mozilla Foundation project that brings open web tools and thinking to areas like education, media, science, and the arts. So I will invite Matt up to speak. He is talking to us about social technology with regards to advocacy and social movements. Matt?
You know what, it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Well, thanks for that introduction. As Lisa mentioned, I work with Mozilla on a project called Drumbeat, which is largely about trying to take Mozilla's mission and extend it to people like you, beyond the traditional geeks and developers and engineers that have been a part of the Mozilla community for the most part up to this point, and actually try to bring kind of open web tools and thinking to areas like philanthropy, like social innovation, like education and the arts. And what I want to talk with you in the short amount of time that we have today is really three things. The elephant, the onion, and your personal secret superpower. Everybody in this room has a secret superpower. Your organizations have a secret superpower. So the bulk of what I want to talk about today is how can you use open web and social media tools to make that secret superpower less secret and to make it easier for people who want to help you outside of the organization, inside the organization, other superheroes, to help you with your mission, whatever that mission is. So let's start with the elephant. What's the elephant? So the elephant is the elephant in the room. I think around any discussion about the web and social media in 2011, and that elephant is that most projects fail. And we're not often very good about talking about this, frankly, and openly. I think we should. I was reading a Forrester, research study that just was published last week or something. 68% of web and social media projects in Fortune 1000 projects, Fortune 1000 companies fail. They either don't deliver the return on investment that they were hoping for, or they just don't deliver the results that people want. Now, I don't bring this up as a big negative bummer. Mozilla has a mantra, which is fail early, fail often. Failure can teach us something. So what can we learn from failure, or what does the elephant have to tell us? I'm going to suggest that there are a bunch of small reasons and one big reason. And the big reason is more interesting. The small reasons I'm not going to really speak to. I think they're probably familiar to many of the people in the room. What I would say is that we've overemphasized the technology and underemphasized the people and wisdom. The specific operational wisdom, or the kung fu. We've done a good job about encouraging people that they have to have a web and social media strategy. I think we've done a poor job of actually focusing on the how. Like, how do you do it effectively? We don't talk a lot about how your organizations are using the telephone or electricity in your campaigns, because we assume they're just baked in. It's a part of the infrastructure. It's a part of the air that we breathe. I think we're at that same moment with the web and social media, that in some ways we can stop futzing with the tools and actually focus on the wisdom and the how. But the other thing I would say is that the web and social media have become a victim of their own success, that everybody and their dog now has a Twitter account. And I'm not making this up. There actually is Twitter for dogs. It's called Puppy Tweets, right? Your aunt and uncle has a blog. You know, I was at the health food store yesterday. They were like, follow us on Twitter. Like, why do I want to follow my health food store on Twitter? You know, like, we are drowning in content. We're drowning in information. And in some ways, what I think that means is that content is no longer king, right? This is an often repeated mantra. It's all about content. It's all about content. Content is no longer king. What is important is meaningful engagement and participation. And, you know, Kirstin just spoke to this. It's all about impact. It's all about engagement. It's all about participation. We need to stop drowning people in content and filling their inboxes with yet another petition campaign or yet another urgent appeal. And instead, I think that we need to fundamentally kind of rethink the opportunity. And this is you know, kind of a personal breakthrough I had recently around what the opportunity of social media and the web really is. And my personal kind of aha moment was realizing that I personally actually had it wrong, and that I was bringing a kind of broadcast media mindset to social media. And that in fact, the opportunity lies in kind of turning those things inside out. And that, you know, really is about going deep with small numbers of people as opposed to wide with large numbers of people. And that really takes us to the onion. So if the elephant in the room is, you know, most projects fail, I think the onion offers us some kind of way to sort of understand why and to rethink the opportunity. So imagine yourself, you are at the center of the onion. So that's you there. And then just imagine for a moment the 10 people around you in your work. Like you have a project that you're working on right now. Who are those 10 people that you work with on a daily basis? And then think 1 degree of separation beyond them. You know, those 10 people and then the 100 people that they touch around them, their social network. That is your sphere of influence, those 100 people. And I guess my thesis is that, you know, the main value of the web and social media today is getting more value and more help and more meaningful collaboration from those 100 people. And maybe 1 layer of the onion beyond them, their social network as well. That it's actually more about getting honest, engaging participation from that small group of people who wants to help you and has the knowledge and skills and expertise to do it, rather than aiming out here. And this is where everybody goes. And so this is, you know, 4 years ago, this was the bulk of my work. You know, I was doing viral storytelling for nonprofits. And it was about creating viral videos. And my first viral video got 300,000 views on YouTube. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then my second one got like 600,000 views. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And this was the whole goal, right? Where it's like, you know, we stand at the center and then we cast our fly fishing rod like, zzz, like as far out from the center as we can, because that's where the big numbers are, right? Like that's where all the big fish are. Like that's what the organizations want. They want to go viral. They want to grow a huge list. You know, they want big numbers. They want those kind of artificial metrics that Kirstin was talking about. And I bought into it. And I thought that the promise of the web was that an average schmuck like me could reach 600,000 people, that I could be like a broadcaster. And then something happened. The first was the numbers started going down. As more and more organizations started doing the same thing and flooding people's inboxes with viral videos and petition campaigns and blah, 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 the numbers and the return on investment just started going like this. And the second thing that happened is everybody started talking about petition fatigue. We all realized that we weren't giving those 600,000 people anything meaningful to do. All we were asking them to do over and over again was A, give us money, and B, sign this petition. And by the way, you kind of know that signing the petition is actually just a transparent grab to get your email address. And that's harsh, right? Like I'm overstating it, I guess, for emphasis. And this was the work I did. But we had 2 years. I remember being in meetings, we're like, oh, geez, we got to get beyond petitions. What are we going to do? What are we going to give people to do? We have to have a call to action. And it was always an afterthought. It was always like, okay, we're running the campaign. Oh, we need a better call to action than signing a petition. What are we going to do? I think today, in some ways, we can encourage ourselves to have the sort of the courage and the imagination to think small. You know, to actually make engagement and participation and collaboration the thing rather than the afterthought. And to really focus on What is your particular core competency or strength as an individual, as an organization? Who are the 100 people, or maybe even one layer beyond that, the 1,000 people in a position to actually help with that mission? And how do you go beyond thinking about those people as a mass audience to a community of peers? Crowds and mass audiences are not smart, and they can't really do much to help you. Communities of peers can help. They are in a position to actually co-build and help drive your mission forward. So I think the fundamental question for us now is, how do we use open web tools and thinking to increase the impact of small numbers of passionate people who want to help us do good, both inside your organization and outside of it? Malcolm Gladwell calls them mavens. They're that small number of cream of the crop activists or volunteers or early adopters or smart friends and families or even colleagues who are working in other departments within your own organization. What are you doing on the web, and how are you using social media right now, today, this week, to help those people help you? One way I'm thinking about it is, it's like the difference between fame versus love. Fame is like getting compliments from people you don't even know, right? Fame is when strangers like you. Some ways when we're young, we seek that out, right? It would be really cool if people that I don't even know think that I'm cool. But then you get a little older and you're like, it's actually a lot more meaningful to be loved by the people you know than by people you don't know. And then in some ways we're chasing the wrong audience. Like, let's chase the sort of friends and family and inner circle of our organizations and get more value and more participation from them, rather than chasing some imaginary mass audience that increasingly doesn't even really exist. So let's say for a moment, that's my kind of particular bias or big kind of idea. If you think there's some merit in it, the question is, how do we do it? And this takes us to the sort of secret superpower. I think of it as the superhero utility belt. So what is your core competency or strength? What does your organization do that no other organization does quite as well? And how do you make that unique strength or superpower more open, more agile, and more participatory? How do you enable more participation in that secret strength? So, Batman's superhero utility belt, he's got the smoke grenades and the shark repellent and the laser cutter. I think that in some ways we can think about what are the equivalent for you as an individual. So this is mine. This is what I use on a daily basis. I use my blog for work all the time. I use #drumbeat on Twitter. I've actually ignored the sort of fire hose of followers. All I do is use that one hashtag. I do all of my drafting and collaborative editing in Etherpad. I encourage everybody to check out Etherpad. It's amazing. I use wikis. I use public chat. I've stopped people from private messaging me with instant messages and instead do all my chat out in the open where other colleagues can see it and help. And when we do build websites, we try to build them as quickly and as simply as possible. So this is my equivalent of kind of the Swiss Army knife or the superhero utility belt. The key thing, I think, is to stop waiting for the perfect website and just grab a bunch of tools like that already exist that you can start using in about 10 minutes, cobble them together however you can, and just go. And the goal of using those tools is smart collaboration. Even if it's just with other people within the organization. In some ways, opening yourself up to mass participation from outside the organization is kind of big and kind of scary. But I think the key point is to stop asking for permission. Don't ask for permission. Grab whatever tools you can get your hands on, hack dumb rules or obstacles that stand in your way, and just go. Just start doing it. So how did Mozilla do it? So I guess Mozilla, really embraced these principles in a major way, and they kind of use them to create a kind of unique product. Mozilla is a nonprofit, but it has a product called Firefox. About 20% of people on the web use it. It's got 300 million users, and we've kind of succeeded against all odds in actually competing, and in some cases winning, with Microsoft, Google, and against Microsoft, Google, and Apple. fairly formidable competitors. How did they do it? They did it with these people. They did it with a global community. So, the key takeaway, I apologize that my slides are getting cut off. The key stat is that, Mozilla has 300 employees, but 20,000 contributors. Like 20,000 people help make Firefox, either by filing a bug or submitting a piece of code. So that's a game changer, right? I mean, if your organization has a staff of 30 or 50 or 100, but if you can use these kinds of techniques to enable collaboration and help from 100,000 people, that's massive, right? Like that's a kind of, can actually fundamentally change the economics of the equation. And part of what it means for us is that occasionally, 12-year-old kids send us letters saying that they love us, and sometimes people make us cupcakes, which is awesome. How do they do it? They work in the open. So here's some quick ideas. This is how Mozilla does it. Maybe some of this will apply in your own work. The first is open source your to-do list. Like, what are you working on? And for many of us, this is kind of buried on our desktop. Mozilla basically puts it in the open. So we use a project management tool called Bugzilla. I don't recommend it. It's really ugly. But it works. And what it does basically puts out in the open or public, like this is basically the 17,000 things that Mozilla is working on right now. Anybody can go here. Anybody can file a bug. If you find a problem in the product, anybody can report it here. Anybody can look at these tickets to see what we're working on. Anybody can comment or suggest a solution. So I think your organization has a set of priorities or goals or milestones. Make sure there's somewhere where other people can see them, and when they can see them, they may be able to help in new or sort of spontaneous ways. The first is the second point is with design challenges, like basically opening yourself up to the wisdom of your community. So we do this from everything from our t-shirt design to reinventing the future of features in the browser, to basically using design and developer challenges or contests to come up with big ideas from the community. The third way we engage the community is we don't do staff meetings, we have open community calls. And we make them a collaborative effort. So anybody who wants to show up can. And anybody who's suffered through a boring weekly staff meeting, it's so much more interesting when anybody who wants to show up can, or when you can sort of conduct business in the open like that. I just got the 60-second warning, so I'm going to cut through most of this stuff. I guess this kind of echoes Kirstin's point about telling stories. Like if you're going to engage the community, make them the stars of your campaigns, and constantly use photos and stories to reflect the community back to themselves. And lastly, I would say like a huge value of working in the open, even if it's just on your own personal blog, is testing and rapid prototyping. So instead of going off into a cave for 6 weeks with a committee and figuring out what the strategy is going to be and then coming out and building it, constantly test. Like, hey, we need to rewrite copy for the front page of our website as we did here. Like, what do you think it should be? What comes back is not always 100%. Like, you're not going to copy paste some random idea that comes in from your community, but testing is always useful. You will always learn something from testing. And I guess, and the point that I'll just kind of end on is, what I'd say is that, one of the struggles for any organization is coordinating effort. You have a large number of people, they're all focused on the same goal, but it's really hard to actually sync up that effort in real time. And so communicating in public channels like this, working in the open, the sort of paradox is actually exponentially more effective even for you internally, like within the walls of your organization. That opening yourself up to participation from outside the organization also helps you work more effectively inside the organization. It takes stuff out of email threads and email attachments and closed silos and puts them out on the web where you can easily put your hands on them and actually enable smarter collaboration. So yeah, I will end there because I'm over time, and look forward to chatting with you all afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. That was really wonderful. I don't know about you guys, I definitely had an aha moment, even working in this space. The fact that maybe we've misunderstood the opportunity is such a strong point. I think that it's up to all of us to steward this exact point. Buying into the numbers hype, we've definitely missed the point here. We're not advertisers. And I think that with this communications paradigm, it's quick for us to actually believe that that's our new role. But to go deep is what our challenge will be in the face of all this din, in the face of growing messages and growing numbers, and increasing competition. But I think that that's really what we owe it to the causes. We owe it to ourselves to actually challenge ourselves to go deep in the face of these tools. So next up with that, I'm going to invite up Peter Deitz. Peter is actually a colleague of mine. He works at MaRS with us on socialfinance.ca. And Peter's going to present the opportunity that social technology presents to be more open and collaborative in program creation and implementation. So with that, I will invite Peter to the podium.
I guess I could just take 10 seconds for my presentation because it's what Kirstin and Matt said. So we could do that, but no, I'll try to add something unique. But it's really neat to see that we're pretty much all saying the same things, whether it's from the perspective of engaging community or fundraising or program development, as I'll talk about. The keys here are openness, letting go of control, and also sort of embracing emerging qualities within the work of your social purpose organizations. I'm going to be drawing on my experience here at MaRS, working on socialfinance.ca, but I'll also be drawing on the hat I previously wore and still wear from time to time as the founder of Social Actions, which is an open database of actions people can take online and offline. I've used a tool called Prezi to put together my thoughts. So for those of you who this is the first time seeing Prezi, I'd encourage the use of it sort of as a best practice in and of itself. This is an attempt to get away from PowerPoint slides and into visualizations of the points you're trying to make. Out of curiosity, who here has seen a Prezi before? Okay, fair number. And who here has used a Prezi, made a presentation using this tool? 3 or 4. Okay, that's great. I love it. I have a lot of fun whipping these things together. I guess I've introduced myself already. What I would like to do is talk a bit about how best practices in social technology are currently thought of. So ordinarily, what they bring to mind are really cool fundraising campaigns that, tipped and produced, 100,000 K or more in donations. Advocacy campaigns that go viral, like some of the work Matt's done previously with net neutrality. Emails to your community that actually get read. So how do you write, if you go to the nonprofit technology conference, you can attend, 10 or more sessions on how to write an email that people will read. Collaboration tools that aren't painful to use and that increase productivity and efficiency. Those 4 buckets are generally what we focus on when we talk about best practices. But what I'd like to suggest is that these outcomes entirely worth pursuing in all ways may just be a small piece of a much larger opportunity for nonprofits, social enterprises, and community groups. Maybe what we're doing today actually in this session is grasping the extent of change that social technology is actually enabling for our organizations and ourselves. What I'm going to talk about isn't guaranteed. There's no guarantee that we're going to move towards open program development and implementation, but there's certainly the opportunity to pursue our work in this new kind of way. So the point I'm making is that the emails that people read, the advocacy campaigns that go viral, the fundraising campaigns that just shoot through the roof, it's just a small piece. It's just a tiny corner of the opportunity that's really in front of us with social tech. What we are permitted to do now is basically create our programs, the actual stuff that we were hired to do, in a way that's open and facing our community and entirely accessible by those in our organization, outside of our organization. This approach, in turn, will build goodwill among your staff, but also among the community of people and practitioners that surround your work. Can create a sense of shared ownership. So if you look at Mozilla and the kind of raving advocates that they have, is that the term, Matt, that you used? It's profound, and it comes out of their openness in building the browser, but then so much more. And ultimately, open program development is about building better programs. So when you engage your community in the creation of whatever it is that you're doing, and you're opening yourself to more inputs, and you're holding yourself accountable to those who may be observing and following that work, I would argue that you'll get better, more creative, more innovative programs out of that effort. And all of this is not to mention the benefits of something we all seek and struggle to create, which is content for our website and collaborations. Funders will always talk to you about how you need to be collaborating more. And collaboration with this new toolkit is so much more than a list of partners on the sidebar, right? It's the invitation to have a deep collaboration with peer organizations. And it's hard to imagine how that level of collaboration could possibly emerge if what you're doing is happening behind a wall. So I've attempted to just map out a few characteristics of what I'm calling open program development and implementation. There's many more. You've already probably jotted down a few in the presentations from Kirstin and Matt. One of them, which is very scary to do, and you're probably going to have a hard time doing this if you're working in a large organization. If you're working in a small organization, it's super simple. But that is the creation of mission-critical, the presentation of mission-critical information on the web in the form of Google Docs or some other social collaboration tool. That's one option. So presenting it, here's mission-critical information that informs our programs. Second step on that approach to operations is saying, here's our mission-critical organizational information, and you all can edit it. So presenting a Google Doc that actually anyone can go in and edit at any time is sort of the extreme radical interpretation of what I'm proposing. And I'll be showing an example of that from social actions in a bit. Here's another one that's sort of scary or different from what we've done in the past. So embracing the idea of a curtainless launch. So there's no big reveal when your program is out there and being implemented. Because it's been developed in the open, your community is aware of it and simply embraces it at the time that it's sort of executed. I think, again, Mozilla Drumbeat is an example of this. They were talking about it for a good 6 months to a year before it was there in action. And finally, real-time reporting on what's planned for the future, what's being done right now in real time, and what's happened. So this is an effort to move way beyond the annual report and basically collect and report on information which, at the end of the year, you can just sort of kind of cut and paste into your annual report, as opposed to waiting till the end of the year to put that information together. I'm sure we could actually take a minute to brainstorm additional characteristics. I have about 5 examples of this, but are there any characteristics that folks would add to this list when it comes to open development of programs? No. We're going to respect the panelist audience relationship for now. Okay. So let's look at some examples. Who here knows of Framework Foundation or the Time Raiser initiative that Neil Patel runs? AGILE is sort of at the forefront of open program development and implementation. And if you have any time at all over this long weekend, I would really suggest going on to frameworkorg.org and to look at the extent of information they're making available on their website in the form of wikis and how-tos and tutorials and just operational documents. Anil's sort of developed something that he's calling sharesies, which is a kind of noun reflecting anything about your organization which you've decided to let out into the world for others to view and share with one another. On their website, you'll see that what the Framework Foundation is embracing is the idea of engaging lots of people by sharing, mission critical information in real time about their organization. They want to lead by example, and so they've set up on their website a section called Sharesies, and they're using software as a service, kind of cloud-based tools to make that information highly distributable and also incredibly available to anyone who will want to review it. That's actually really just the 2-second version of what Anil's vision for the nonprofit sector is. So if you have time, definitely track him down. Social Actions is the organization I was working at before joining MaRS, and I would just like to draw attention to our transition process, which was initiated a year ago, at the time that I needed to move into full-time employment for a variety of reasons. What we did was basically set up an open Google Doc which anyone could edit or contribute to from within our little onion, and we invited people to work with us on identifying organizations that were mission aligned and well resourced, which could take on the programs that we had developed that formed Social Actions. So all of the acquisition process materials were loaded into this Google document or linked to in one form or another, and it was really remarkable to see how, through the course of a year, the community of people who really cared about Social Actions reviewed that material in depth. Our advisors kind of were following it closely, and through that process, we found the organization that decided to take on this program and bake it into their own organizational programs. What's neat about this is our example and how we transitioned Social Actions and what Social Actions represents as an open source sort of social change initiative. There's now an opportunity for us to bake some of that culture into the group that ended up acquiring the project. Happy to talk about that with anyone afterwards. When I joined MaRS, working on socialfinance.ca, I kind of embraced the idea of bringing this kind of open program development into the project that I was hired to work on. And so we launched socialfinance.ca's open business plan, which over the course of 4 months, we sort of populated the different section of a business plan in a way that anyone on the web could contribute to it, but also access it and know exactly how we anticipate making socialfinance.ca a sustainable social venture of its own. Mozilla, not surprisingly, made it into my presentation. If you review the Mozilla Drumbeat wiki, you'll see all of the ways in which Matt has already talked about Mozilla doing their program development in the open. So from the community calls that he mentioned to all of the background material and inspiration and brainstorming ideas that went into creating the Mozilla Drumbeat campaign. DonorsChoose.org, an online platform that allows teachers to raise money, is recently celebrating their 10-year anniversary. And to mark it, what they've done is open up all data about the classroom projects that have been posted on DonorsChoose.org, anonymized donor information, of course, for privacy considerations. And they've launched a contest that invites developers to build applications that work with and visualize and represent and draw insights from that 10 years of data that they've collected through their operations. And finally, this kind of openness in data collection, operational development, and implementation is not limited to small, nimble, agile organizations. There's, at this point, some really large-scale groups that are also embracing open in all of its senses. And one of those, of course, is the World Bank, which has made all data that it collects around and projects it invests in available for third parties to mash up and draw insights from and build on. It's interesting also where the sort of open program development data conversation intersects with open government. And I know at Net Change Week in June, there's a whole session or a whole day on OpenGov. So by way of conclusion, open program development and implementation, while it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, is where I feel some of the most transformative best practices are emerging in the world of social tech for social change. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. So I think, the takeaway there is to really moving beyond the use of these tools to just satisfy our outreach and to think about the potential to help you create your core. So, if you really get the middle of that onion that Matt was talking about right, then the rest becomes so much easier. But fundraising, email campaigns, maybe even mass marketing cause campaigns are things that you might be familiar with, but going open source, what the heck does that entail? That is maybe scary to a lot of people. So with that as my segue, I'm going to talk about Net Change. So this is MaRS's biggest program around social tech for social change. It's a festival. It runs the entire week of June 6th to 10th this year. And we have a different model every year, but one of the things that is always core to the program is our training. So, we can talk about this area till the cows come home, but you may still feel like you walk out of here and just don't know what to do once you sit back down at your desk at your organization. So this is really the event that helps you train, helps you better understand really what we mean about the potential that this communications paradigm has. We have the first 2 days. I'll just really quickly give you a peek at the schedule this year. So Monday, Tuesday is My Charity Connects, where 250 organizations come to get a 101 on social media. And this is programmed in partnership with Canada Helps. It's actually a bigger program that runs throughout the year, but this is the sort of mega mothership conference. So that is it sells out every year. It's a fantastic program. Open Data Day is going to be about open government. So if that's a sort of hot topic of this year, if that's your interest. And then we've also added a mobile component. So if you're really, down with social media tools and you've got your thing going online, but you're really interested in mobile platform and how you can engage your constituents through mobile and handheld devices, then this is the training for you. So again, this is our daytime programming is really geared towards hands-on workshops where you come out with strategy and development for your communications plan. So this one is about 150 people working in social change coming to get a clear, concise plan, working one-on-one with facilitators for mobile. So that's exciting. We also have an art component. We're really interested in different representations of what we mean by social tech for social change. We don't think that training is the only way we can talk about this specific topic. So to that point, we're teaming up with McLuhan 100 it's a partnership that's in Toronto to celebrate Marshall McLuhan's centenary. He's a semiologist that talked about the future of communications, and we have a great installation that's going to be here in the MaRS building for the entire week, so I really encourage you all to see that because it's going to be really cool. And then our evening programming, I won't get into too much detail because I really encourage you to read up on it. Our evening programming runs, it's 1 hour to 2 hours, and this is really where we get provocative. So we push your thinking with regards to social tech for social change, but insert a hot topic. So this year we're really discussing the future of academia and universities in the face of new communications, as well as SMS for SOS is about crisis reporting 2.0. So really how that our whole click to donate or text to save or whatever it might be is changing the paradigm of crisis giving. So I really encourage you guys to come out for that. I think if this whet your appetite here today, then there will be a whole host of things available to you during that week and a great opportunity to network and amazing facilitators. And all these speakers that are here today will be there as well. So now I will open it up to you guys. Please feel free and don't feel shy to ask any questions that you might have. And also, because we're recording the session, if you can grab the microphone or I'll pass it to you, just put up your hand. That'd be great. Did we do such a good comprehensive job that no one has questions? Any final thoughts from the speakers? We do have a question. We do? Okay, great.
Yeah, go ahead. Actually, I do have a question regarding social media like Twitter, Facebook. When is it a good time for example, a startup company to start using them, and what direction should they go when they are new and they don't really have a product yet? They're building the product.
Matt, do you want to take that one?
Sure, or maybe we can each speak to it.
And if you can stand up, that would be great, just because it's
sure.
being filmed. You're on camera.
This feels awkward. I guess what I would say is start using it right away, because there's a group of you who are coordinating a bunch of pretty complex effort, right?
Right.
You're trying to get stuff done. So I would set up a hashtag your project or planning project or whatever, and start using it immediately, because it'll be a lot more efficient than the traditional methods, which are phone calls, email threads, what have you. So I would say right away. I really like the idea of the curtainless launch. So in some ways, start right away, use it to collaborate yourself internally more effectively. And the benefit of that is you can start doing some early testing. Instead of keeping it in the dark and then pulling back the curtain, it's here it is. You're going to discover that a bunch of stuff's broken, that your audience doesn't understand some of it, So start doing that testing and working in the open early, and you sort of, get the benefit of some of that early insight. That's what I would say, but you guys.
So this is a for-profit social purpose business?
This is a for-profit. It's also software, so
Software.
it won't be developed for years.
So one factor which complicates the open culture process is that in business there is the possibility of a business model or a name being lifted, and fundamentally I think your team will just have to address that internally and be at peace with thinking through whether, well, we're going to be doing this development of our business in the open. If another group comes along and adopts our mission and possibly even our name and executes really incredibly around the product or service we had in mind, is that okay? If the mission is fulfilled by someone else in the for-profit context, are you okay with it? If the answer is yes, then great, you can move on to your next startup. If the answer is no, then you may be there may be incentives to be a little more incremental in the extent of your open development of those products and services.
Okay.
I think it's also, just to add to that, there's no silver bullet with this stuff, so there's nothing is prescriptive. I think it's just based on your comfort level, and especially when you're for-profit, you have all these, and if you're a software, I'm sure that there's some kind of IP involved, so you just want to be careful that your own staff feels comfortable with the timelines of you going out with it. But certainly, being open is a new way to beta test something and get a community consensus. If you've really bonked things up with an element of the software, and you haven't caught that in your sort of user experience testing, then it's a great way to get more voices and more eyes on your, getting their opinions on what you have to offer on your product. So in that way, you can say, we're launching, but we're still iterating. And you guys have a say in the final product.
Yeah.
So, and we've seen where some companies have done that, but almost to like that times 10 is like, my Starbucks, or they're actually crowdsourcing ideas that would make the Starbucks experience for consumers more appealing to them. So looking to your consumer base, people who will actually use the product
Right.
to tell you what they want out of it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I add one quick more
We have another, yeah.
asterisk? An asterisk on what I was saying is just that execution is really hard, right? So if your only concern or fear in this case is your competition or potential competition, then the possibility of them executing better than you is possibly reduced, or it shouldn't be the only factor taken into account.
We have a question right here.
I'm wondering, in a scheme of basically radical openness and transparency, how do you make decisions about accountability? And I'll just leave that open to.
That's a great question. So at Mozilla, we draw a pretty firm distinction between working in the open and involving our community versus radical democracy, because in fact it's not a radical democracy. Like there are, within Mozilla, on the software side, there are people who are buck stoppers. They're called module owners, and they ultimately decide, like, hey, is this piece of software ultimately going to make it into the product or not? And I think that's important because accountability is crucial, right? Like, it's not like, okay, everybody in the community or everybody who shows up on a community call, take a vote. That doesn't work. Right? Like and so there is actually a distinction between radical openness versus a kind of like, radical democracy. And, there's another kind of interesting distinction that's become apparent for me is the difference between like feedback versus testing. Like, you can ask a community of people, what do you think? And they'll say, I think it should be green, or I think it should be orange, I think it should be blue. It doesn't mean that you're sort of beholden to actually implement that feedback. What it does tell you is like, hey, maybe the color is broken. Like it doesn't necessarily tell you whether it should be orange or red or green. It just, from a testing point of view, it tells you that you need to take a second look at it. So, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I think there is a kind of like a Pollyannish, like kind of kumbaya sort of flavor. Some of the stuff's like, oh yeah, man, like just do whatever the community tells you to do and it'll all work out. And that's really, we don't have to be naive. Like I think we can be, the goal of openness ultimately is agility. Not a kind of like naive, like anything goes democracy.
Do you have a mic?
This is basically to the same issue. When Kirstin was talking about one third, I think a lot of people are very afraid of that person who has no life, who wants to talk endlessly to your organization. And how do you say, belt up, move on, get a life, without, upsetting them and not having them help and blah, blah. So I think, that's my concern about the 1/3 part is how do you engage without, having them take over. And I think a lot of organizations are afraid that their employees will be in these endless conversations with the same 8 people.
Did you guys want to answer? No. I would say that depending on what the conversation is, the endless conversations with 8 people might be a good thing if they're helping you kind of get to where you need to go as an organization. And that was what Matt was saying about the, your core group of people. They might be your core group of.
Anyone's worried about the really smart people who are coming up.
Okay, so the wackadoos, right? So the weird people. I get that. I think you can still focus the conversations that you're having. I don't think you have to. You don't have to necessarily engage someone endlessly because they're engaging you endlessly. And when I said, engage people where they are for a third of the time, you still have an organization and a mission and something that you're trying to achieve. And the point of the conversation is to engage them around the impact that you're having and how you can facilitate that together. If that conversation's not going anywhere, I don't see any problem in saying, thanks for your input. I'm going to actually talk to someone else.
So you sort of focus it.
Focus it, yeah. I mean, it's not just saying, I'm wearing these pants today. What pants are you? Like, it's, it's about the mission that you're all trying to achieve together. I don't know if that's.
I think, and this was also probably a similar worry when organizations open their shops with a phone line. Like, what if our phone rings off the hook with people that just, right? So, I mean, take some power back and say, if this is really taking over some staff time, there's nothing wrong with saying we're open at noon to dialogue. So if you really want to continue to engage us in conversation, we have lunchtime talks, and this is when we'll be online, kind of thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing something like that and just saying, we have a lot of work to do, just like everybody else, and these are our times of availability. Any other questions? Any examples that anyone wants to shout out that are really inspiring of organizations that really inspire you doing this stuff right now? Yeah.
Yes, no one's really talked about Foursquare.
Foursquare.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was, Foursquare, and they used, I think it was, I'm sorry, I actually have to recall some of it back, so if I can talk about it again later.
That's okay. I think,
Yeah.
I mean,
But just in
the
general,
need-
Foursquare is a
Mhm.
tool now of, as like an event management.
I think Foursquare, a lot of people are using it to sort of build community and to sort of, I mean, the point there, are you guys familiar with Foursquare? Okay, so I mean, I think it's a really interesting way to also build like an archival sort of storytelling, like we've been here kind of temporal experience for people that have been through a space, but they might want to know who else had been there, or if their buddy is passing through at the same time or has been there and recommends something. It's definitely a tool that sort of is layered on top of this, like everything that we've discussed today. It's an enabling tool, really. So I guess I'm just gonna wrap up, and I mean, I think I'm left inspired today by what our speakers have said, for sure. I mean, some of the messages aren't new, maybe to some of you. Be authentic and measure things that matter and things of that nature. But when it really comes down to it, I mean, this stuff isn't easy, but we could all afford to sort of, in the face of, the rapidly changing communications paradigm at our fingertips, I think we could afford, and we owe it to ourselves, to slow down a little bit and challenge ourselves to be strategic. Go back to your main goals. Why are we working in the social change sector to begin with? I really like Matt's idea of, instead of trying to aim for the 600,000 person campaign, why are we doing that? You're not Nike, you're not marketing a shoe. Really what we want to do is engage people for meaningful, deep social change. That is never an easy task. And I think if we continue to hone in on, why we're doing this, what our mandate is, these tools will better serve us indefinitely. So with that, let's all become Gladwell mavens and use this stuff a little bit more strategically, and not get into the numbers hype, and not be overwhelmed by it. And I encourage you all to come to Net Change for greater thought about this topic. So thanks for coming.